Welcome back to the Automation Podcast, the world's number one industrial automation product and technology show. Thanks to you, our audience of highly skilled automation professionals. Thank you for being a member of our audience, and thank you for tuning back in this week. Now, for those of you new to the show, my name is Shawn Tierney of Insights in Automation, and each week I invite a new vendor or product expert on the show to talk about products and technologies. And during the show, I play the role of the audience, asking questions I think you might have as well as questions I have. And given that a quarter of you listen to the show on audio only platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I'll try to call attention to any visuals that you guys may want to know about. Now, this week, there's really no visuals because this is an interview with Steve Mustard, former president of the ISA, now an automation consultant. He recently did a very large digital twin project, and I invited him on to talk about digital twins. He also helped write a book on digital twins, so I thought you guys would find this really interesting. But before we jump into the interview, I first wanted to ask you guys if you do enjoy this episode or any of the episodes, please remember to give it a like, a sub, and a share. And if you're on those audio only platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give it a 5-star review. This is the best way for me to grow the audience and find new vendors to come on the show. It can be really hard sometimes to find vendors to come on. And so the only leverage I have with them is you. How many of you guys are listening out there? So please, if you want me to keep doing this show, help me grow the audience. Help me by giving us a like, a sub, and a share, and a 5-star review. And that is what I take to the vendors when I said, hey, we'd love to know about your PLCs, HMIs, VFDs, and all the cool technologies you guys make and use. So with that, I appreciate you guys all. Thank you very much. And let's go ahead and jump right into the interview with Steve Mustard on digital twins. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Steve Mustard, former president of the ISA, and he's also been on talking about soft PLC myths. And Steve has agreed to come on today and talk to us about digital twins. And I'm really excited. He recently did a very large project on a digital twin. He's going to share all kinds of insights with us. But before we get into that, Steve, just for those people who haven't seen the show before, maybe didn't see the episodes you were on previously, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure thing, Sean. Thanks for having me again. Steve Mustard, I'm an independent automation consultant. I've been in that profession for over 35 years now, worked in many different sectors: defense, oil and gas, water, wastewater, transportation, food and beverage, and IT. I've done a lot of different projects over the years for different customers, and a lot of them have been involved in automation, specifically cybersecurity of automation systems. And then more recently, my last major project was a major capital construction project for an oil and gas company, and that involved building a new production platform. And I also got involved in that project in some of the new technology, including digital twin.
Which is very cool. You and I had a long conversation in the pre-show about this, preparing for this episode. And so it's just amazing. Would you mind, just for anybody who's maybe they're just programming PLCs and HMIs all day and they really haven't gotten into the world of digital twins, could you can bring them up to speed on what you see digital twins as being?
Sure. Many people have different definitions of digital twins, and I think the simplest form is some formulas in a spreadsheet where you can evaluate the performance of some process. But at the other extreme, we've got things like very advanced process simulations, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and then also what I'm particularly interested in, which is 3D visualization, so representing physical facilities, but in a digital space. And that's the kind of implementation that I did on this particular project. So if you imagine, in this case, you've got an oil and gas field, and you've got a reservoir, you've got subsea equipment, you've got well paths, you've got a production platform on the surface of the sea. A lot of equipment that's represented in that space, and the benefit here of the digital twin is you can represent all of that digitally in a full scale, geospatially correct space.
I'm just thinking here, right? So if we look at history over the centuries, creating twins or models of the real world has been so helpful for planning, like planning cities or planning even like building a boat or building a building or and we've gone into over the years before computers existed, people would create twins of their production facilities and models of them, and it's to help them really understand more than just a 2D version of what they were going to build. They wanted to have the 3D version of it so they could, maybe place themselves, they couldn't stand in it, but they could place themselves, try to visualize them being there. And I think with the dawn of computers, people said, "Hey, let's instead of making a model, let's make a computer model or digital twin." And I think even just things like objects in SolidWorks could be considered digital twins and in early PLC emulators, right? So I'm familiar with the old Slick 500 emulator we use with the Micrologics, and of course there's much more powerful newer ones today, right? But even those were a type of digital twin because it acted like a PLC. Now it wouldn't. I don't think it would be considered a digital twin in today's world because we're
Hmm.
more. I think we're much more demanding on of a digital twin today. I mean, it really needs to be like a real like a real representation of what's there in the field. But and of course now we got virtual reality, we got holograms. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do today in 3D space to really just step into. If anybody's ever put on a VR headset, you feel like you're there. Whether it's a cartoon world or a realistic world, you really feel like you're there, and you can see how that can start. It's not just chasing down goblins like I used to do with my grandson, but it's like you're actually can get it. If everything's accurate, you can get a feel for, hey, can two people walk side by side here? Hey, is there enough room to swing a wrench? Um, it's going to be a problem to carry this pipe down this corridor because it's truly not big enough. I mean, things you just know intuitively by being in the digital twin. So tell us a little bit about this last journey. I know we can't go into specifics, right? About like the company and the site and all that stuff. But can you tell us a little bit about this journey and what you learned as you were going through it?
Sure. So the idea we had on this particular project was taking some of the capabilities that we already knew existed, the things you just described, like 3D modeling of facilities that people do for construction purposes, and seeing what we could do to help both the project and then also operations when this thing goes into production. So the project lasts about 4 5 years. The operations phase lasts as much as 35 years. And so over that 35-year period, um, if you can find ways to save money by doing things more efficiently, then obviously that really does make a big difference over 35 years. So the idea we had was to use agile methodologies, which is another kind of common or relatively modern thing about project management these days. Instead of the old waterfall method where you develop something over a long period of time and you specify the requirements and then you go in, implement it, and then you come back 18 months later with something. We used this agile methodology where we said, well, let's start with something that exists today and let's see what we can do with it, and then build it up over time, add functionality to meet what users really needed. So one of the ways we did that is we presented the users with something that represented the 3D representation of the facility and the environment. And then we, over time, asked them questions about, what kind of things do you do in your day job? And which of those describe how you do those things? And then what are the challenges about doing those things? And then let's see if we can use this technology to make that job easier or more efficient or more reliable or safer or whatever it might be. Now, because this project in particular involved an offshore facility about 140 miles off the shore of Louisiana, um, it has the obvious disadvantage that it's expensive, time consuming, and challenging to get people to that facility. And if we can find a way to do work that would normally be done on the facility but do it onshore, that can have a huge impact in terms of time saving, cost saving. And so uh, that's what we spent a lot of the project doing, is trying to find ways to do that. Now, as we did the project, as we built that facility, as we built the digital twin of that facility, we also found some other benefits that we could have from having a digital twin. So, for example, you described a situation where you can say, well, because this is realistic from a size and dimension point of view, we can actually evaluate whether or not things fit, whether we can get things, move things around. And one of the things we discovered in this process is that one of the doorways in the facility was not quite wide enough to fit a piece of equipment through when it needs to be replaced or maintained. That kind of thing, traditionally, you wouldn't find out until you've already built a facility, and then it's way too late, and then you have to dismantle the whole thing and reassemble it outside, and so on. So those kind of cost prevention things are hard to quantify because, of course, it might not happen, and if it does happen, it's very significant. But if it doesn't happen, no one notices. But going back to the use cases, what are that? A lot of the work in these kind of offshore facilities involves sending people out to do things like inspections for corrosion, for instance, maintenance work, engineering work to replace equipment or to modify equipment, and so on. And a lot of planning goes into that work. And traditionally, because the data that is produced in projects like this is not maintained very well, it's in two dimensions as well, and so it's not great for visualizing. So you end up having to send people to the facility to take measurements, to take photographs, and that's very expensive and time consuming to schedule that. So, an activity to do the piece of work might only take a few weeks to actually do the work, but actually planning that work and building that work up and scheduling it might take months potentially. If we can reduce that time scale for the planning and design of that, and then also reduce the time spent in the remote area, then we can save a lot of money. We can get work done more quickly. We can reduce risk and reduce outages and reduce production loss. And also, by reducing the amount of time people spend in the remote facility, make them safer because they're not in hazardous environments as much as they need to be. So, huge number of benefits there. So, one example of that is that when you replace a piece of equipment, you need to isolate it. So you need to identify where the isolation valves are, and then you need to have a plan about which valve you turn off first and in which order, and you have to do that safely. And one of the things you can do if you've got a really good digital twin is that you can understand how everything's connected and where everything is, and also the orientation of everything or the direction of everything, the flow, for instance, through the piping and the valves. So you can more easily automate the process of identifying which valves you need to isolate. So in that example, it may take several hours, let's say 5 hours, for someone to work through a P&ID and identify all the valves and mark them up and then write a list and get that in place for a permit to do that isolation. With a digital twin, it can take a few minutes. And not only does it just take a few minutes, but it's very accurate because it's based on the actual design of the facility. You're not relying on people interpreting drawings and working it out for themselves. You're actually using the data behind it. So that's a huge saving, again, in terms of time and cost, but also accuracy, reliability, because the last thing you want to do in work like that is to make a mistake, have to redo it, or have to reschedule the work if you've got a problem. So that kind of thing can make a very significant impact. Um, so the because of the agile process, of course, we developed this over time, and so the functionality evolved and got better and better over time, and we were able to do more and more. And as people saw what it could do, then they could identify other things that it could do as well. And so that's very much the agile process. Is you see something and then you realize it could do something else, and then
Yeah.
you can take it forward. So,
Yep. I'm
I
thinking
wanted
about
to.
this. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I wanted to mention one thing as well, because you said about digital twins, and you said the kind of very elementary digital twins, and maybe they're not really digital twins anymore. But I think it's actually true to say that many consider that there's various levels of maturity for digital twin, right? So you can actually have very basic digital twins,
Oh,
which do
yeah.
very limited things, almost just like a 3D model, like your
Hmm.
SolidWorks example. And
Hmm.
then you can go all the way to the other extreme, which is the kind of thing I'm describing, which is very much more interactive, very much more data rich, and very much more, potentially also live data as well, and simulation,
Yeah.
and lots of other things. So it's perfectly valid to have a spectrum of digital twins still today.
So, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, all right, if I have an OEM machine that I'm building, I could probably do the whole thing in SolidWorks. There would be some pain points. There's going to be things I don't have models for. Um, you know, and I'm going to have to do. It's not just get all the different pieces and parts from the vendor and put it all in SolidWorks and it's done. I mean, I'm going to have to do some custom stuff. So building everything in, it would be a big, daunting task. But doing an entire rig, which is a multi-story facility, right? I mean, you had to have done something other than just get 3D drawings from everybody, right? How did you model? And I already know the answer because we talked about this in the pre-show. But how do you go about modeling an entire facility like that?
Well, yeah, you make a really good point that the first thing I would say is that the digital twin is only as good as the information that you can obtain to build that digital twin. So that's certainly true. And all the things I just said before about being able to do things reliably can only be done if you got that data. But one of the things we learned in the project is that the enemy of the good is perfect, as they
Oh
say,
yeah.
right? So it's very easy to say we can't do this because we don't have everything, and so we're never going to do anything at all. And so we became advocates for saying, well, what do we have today? And then we put that in, and then we find out where the gaps are, and then we gradually try and identify a way to close those gaps. So, for example, on a facility like this, not only do you have a 3D model of the overall topsides equipment, but you also have individual models for pieces of equipment, like maybe power generation turbine, for example,
Okay. Yep.
or a water treatment skid or something like that that's made by a separate vendor. And some of those models, they're not necessarily as detailed as other models. And so you get like a good outline of it, you know
Hmm.
exactly how big it is, and you can see roughly where everything is, but you can't manipulate all the different parts in it, like the valves and the motors and things. And that limits the capabilities that you have. But it still gives you more than you have today. And so we've always been a big advocate for saying, well, we can make your life easier. We might not be able to solve every one of your problems today, but we'll make your life easier. For example, um, I could identify, because we tag all of our pieces of equipment that are maintainable with unique
Yep.
identifiers. We can say things like, well, okay, we don't know exactly where this valve is, but we know it's on this particular skid. So
Okay.
we can direct someone to the the approximate location, and then they can find it more easily than they could do before, right? So there's lots you can do to progress. Now, the next thing you can do on top of 3D models, and this is very applicable to brownfield environments where you probably don't have good 3D models. So if you
Yeah.
take, for instance, refineries as a good example,
Yep.
many refineries are 50 or even more years old, and
Yep.
they didn't have 3D modeling back then, and so they don't have 3D models. So, how do you create a digital twin for a refinery? Well, one place to start is you can do laser scanning. So you can do photorealistic data capture. You can use a $70,000 camera that captures 360 images, and you can actually, because it's 360, you can actually see everything and you can identify everything, and that allows you to provide a baseline, for this is my 3D model now, if you like. It's not a 3D model, but it's a 3D representation of what you've got, and you can build it up from there. So you can geotag things. You can have people go around and you can say, I identify this piece of equipment and give it a number and so on. Or you can use other information to identify stuff, and you can overlay all of that on top of the laser scan information. So again, you can take something and you can gradually build it up and put it together. And where I'm a huge advocate for that. As I said, these projects, when you deliver them, the facility lasts decades and doesn't
Yeah.
change very much. And so, what I want to see people do is to say to use this technology to make the maintenance and upkeep of the facility easier. So instead of constantly looking at pieces of paper, constantly doing the same mundane tasks over and over, can we gradually make the quality of the digital data better, and so that they can spend less time in the future, and then gradually refine that over time, so that in 5 years' time it's even better, and then in 10 years' time it's even better than that.
I can definitely see in the future a service being to hire somebody to come and laser scan your facility, and what you get in
Right.
return is a model you can navigate either on a 2D screen or in a virtual setting, and then going from there and be able to plop in, hey, this OEM sent me a 3D model, let's plop that in where it was just like we'll cut that piece of
Right.
just dumb block out and we'll put their actual model in there. And I can see that growing and growing, especially when you're talking about something offshore, the expense of getting out there, you were explaining this to me, it's just phenomenal how the cost and the to host somebody out there for training when you could do training onshore. I mean, the amount of money you can save, it's hard to in other industries, maybe in like nuclear or some other industries, glass making. There's some things you can't do easily while production's running, or
Mhm.
easily in a safe environment in a business in a conference room. But yeah, I can definitely see on the training side too. Can you talk a little bit about some of the practical training you were able to do with the digital twin?
Yeah, that's a great example of a key use case for digital twins. As you alluded to, sending people to the facility to familiarize themselves and train them on things is expensive, but is also dangerous as well, and can impact production, like you said. So, how can you make it so that they can have a realistic experience, but without having to actually go there? So, digital twin is perfect for that. And you talked about earlier some of the other technologies that could apply here, like virtual reality or augmented reality, and they play a big part in this as well. So even when you have a digital twin, even though the what you see is 3 dimensional, if you're looking at it on a 2 dimensional plane, like a desktop or a laptop, then it's good. It's better than looking at drawings, but it's still not
Yeah.
immersive enough to maybe replace on site training. But with virtual reality, especially, what you can do is you can actually have someone put on some of those Quest glasses, for instance, from Meta,
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
can immerse themselves in that environment, just like when you're playing the games with your grandson and you get really immersed in that game and it feels real because you're kind of able to see in 3 dimensions and you're actually immersed in that. You can do the same with these digital twins. So now you're looking at, as I look around, I'm looking at this facility and I may never have been there today, and this is the first time I'm seeing it. So I can now see what it looks like. I can see where things are. And I think you mentioned this earlier, some of the examples are like, well, if I'm going to go there and do some work, um, where is the equipment that I'm going to work? Is the valve down here at knee height? Is it up 10 feet above me? And do I need scaffolding before I can reach it? Is it in
Yeah.
an inaccessible location? Is it in a dark location? So I need lighting. And there's a dozen other things you can think about that you might need to prepare for before you go and do that work. Um, so those things are huge, and then competence assessment training for whether someone's capable of doing something is really important. So can you give some task to do? Can you watch them do that task in a simulated environment with knowing that they're not going to do anything to cause a problem, but then see how they respond in the real environment is huge compared with, let's sit down at a desk here and you tell me how you're going to do it, and I still don't really know how you're going to respond if you're in the real environment. So that's a huge way to change how to do things. And I will say as well, not only is it huge from a time saving point of view and reducing people having to go to site, but also think about the fact that because this is digital, it's totally repeatable as well. So I can ask you to do something, you can do it, and then you can do it again, and you can do it again. And
Yeah.
we can see if you improve, we can see how you perform in different situations, like change the lighting or change the weather or something, and we can
Yeah.
redo the same scenario and get the same result potentially, or get different results, and that helps us as well. So these things, I think um, these are still on the cusp, if you like. I mean, I don't think some of these things people use universally yet, but I think this is definitely where it's going.
Yeah, and a lot of people are using them too for logistics, like the plan moving stuff around the plant floor. A lot of people are using them for, timing different machines. So they have all their machines in this plant. They want to time it. Like, all right, so this does so many parts per minute. This does so many parts per minute. You know, is there gonna, are we gonna have too much work in progress? Are we gonna have a bottleneck between these machines? So there's so many different people coming at this, and so many different ways of implementing digital twins that it's kind of exciting to see where it's going to go as it all starts coalescing and everybody starts picking up the same features as other people. I know we've worked with the machine simulator software here, where we built a digital twin of our basic machine, our widget maker, and so we're not actually giving that to students yet because just we've been so busy. But you'll actually be able to put on your VR headset and go up to the panel and push the buttons to see if your program works in VR. And so it's just an exciting. A lot of exciting things coming down the road, and even when they get the augmented reality on our glasses, that'll be the best. So you can look at a pump and you'll be able to see what it's how long it's been running, and is it due for maintenance and how hot it is. And so those days are very close. As I follow the augmented reality glasses; they just keep getting better and better. And I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but I'm thinking a couple more years and we'll be able to put on glasses and walk through the store and see, hey, is that on sale next door? Maybe I should go next door to get that. Or, is this the average price, or what's the reviews? I'm looking at five different,
Right,
gadgets. What are the reviews on these things? And
right.
so exciting times ahead. Now, I know we covered a lot of ground. Was there a topic we didn't get to? I kind of lost track of all the points we covered.
Well, one other thing that we haven't really touched on in terms of technology and its impact on digital twins was artificial intelligence. So
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
you mentioned about looking at 3D representations of things and identifying things, and one of the things that artificial intelligence can do in that space is identify pieces of equipment, for instance, and automatically label them, tag them, and such like. So that's got a huge potential for making these digital twins better. Um, and then also, obviously, things like identifying areas of corrosion, for example. So, looking at some piping and seeing different colors and blisters and pits and things in pipes that shouldn't be there. Um, Stuff like artificial intelligence is doing that, and obviously a lot of things that are driving this is the processing power. You mentioned at the beginning about um, being able to do this, and one of the reasons why we're able to do all of this now is because the processing power is there. A lot of these things are not new concepts, but they weren't really feasible before because we didn't have the cost-effective processing power. And like you say, with things like augmented reality glasses and virtual reality glasses, some of those are still quite expensive, and so they
Yeah.
may be not mainstream enough, but they will be over time because
Hmm.
the technology improves, the processing gets cheaper, and the adoption gets greater, and so over time things like that will be more mainstream as well. I think.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of parallels to that in the vision and code reading world, where companies like SICK and Cognex and IFM and Banner and all these great companies, we try to get them all on our show every year, multiple times if we can. But they're building more and more AI, and we talk about this on my morning show with the regulars. AI is these are better algorithms, machine learning. I mean, we're taking and processing. What can a like my wife is a breast cancer survivor, and she talks about some of the new advancements there, where maybe a trained tech will look at 100 different pictures and of the body to look for illness, but you can feed millions and millions and millions of images through a computer system, right? And teach it. And now they have cameras you can put on your plant floor, and the self-teaching is so good. You just show it good parts and bad parts, and then
Mhm.
it's ready to run on your production line. And even like the folks from SICK, they have a system where if the unit doesn't have enough memory, you can train it online, and then it'll download the squished machine learning algorithm to the camera, so it can do that inspection. So it's made setting up these systems just so much easier, and that's an exponential growth in that area. They're just getting every year they're getting better and better and better. And so if we can better analyze products on a production line, we can better analyze corrosion and probably see it and identify issues well before a trained eye. I mean, maybe the best expert could be better, just like an expert chess player could beat a computer chess game. But for the average person doing this, that computer's seen, a couple of lifetimes worth of images,
Mhm.
and through, many millions of dollars worth of computing hardware has been able to, be trained to find out what's bad and what's good. And
Right.
I just think it's amazing. And that goes to your point with what you were doing on the rigs as well as finding corrosion. Well, it's going to be a day where it's going to be much easier just to have a camera look at it and use its, $1 billion worth of investment to tell you, what it is versus trying to get that train expert there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and with those kind of facilities, by the way, uh, it takes about 5 years to inspect an entire facility for
Wow.
corrosion. And guess how frequently you have to inspect it? Every
Every
5 years.
5 years.
So you're basically painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? You're constantly inspecting it with
Yep.
people. So it's even not just a case of being better than the person, but I mean the fact that you can do this, you can go and capture an entire facility with laser scan equipment in about 3 to 4 weeks,
Oh, wow.
and then analyze that stuff with machine learning in another 3 to 4 weeks, say. So you're kind of you can do that much more frequently than humans can practically,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then also obviously
And
over
cost
time,
effectively. Yeah.
yeah, and then over time, not only that, but you're also looking at trends as well. So now you're comparing images to images, and you're starting to see where things degrade more quickly than others, and then you're starting to focus in on those areas as ones that we really need to be concerned about. So a bit like your breast cancer example,
Yeah.
that's some of the insights that you get that are different from just different people looking at images at a point in time, but actually looking at trends over images as well.
Yeah, and Elon Musk has some interesting presentations from a couple years back where he goes through and shows how they were training his car to avoid obstacles, and the car would see a bike mounted to the back of a van in front of it and
Mm.
assume that the bike was trying to cross the street and would slam on the brakes. It's like, no,
Right,
the bike is
right.
moving with the car. And so those are things we can all understand. Is like, okay, there are
Hmm.
going to be these exceptions that we just take for granted. We just
Right.
intuitively know that these systems have to be trained, machine learning, AI. They have to be trained to understand that. Another one was, you probably seen this where you'll have the tractor trailer with a bunch of tractor trailer, the actual engines, right, stacked on it. So it looks like five that are connected, right? And the AI didn't understand what that was, and it's like,
Hmm.
no, he's just towing four other trucks with him instead of towing a trailer. He's towing four other engines with them,
Right.
cabs with them. So there's a lot goes into it, a lot, and so when you get into specialties like this, it becomes even more important. And I think most of us will probably interface with it in a more, you know, average day in and day out way, sensing a bottle or a box or a product, looking for defects.
Hmm.
But it has repercussions everywhere in our industry, in our world. I think it's really
Right.
cool. There's a well, we could probably talk forever on this, but I think we're coming to the end of the show. Was there anything else you wanted to say that we didn't get into? I've lost track of my list that I was following.
Well, one of the things we talked about at the beginning is that there's many different types of digital twins, and
Yeah.
I know you've got a copy of this book. I do recommend this book. It's one of the most comprehensive books on digital twins out there. It came out last year from Springer, and it's a two-volume set. But what the editors did here was to put together over 30 different chapters on different types of digital twins, all the way from the simulation type thing, all the way to smart cities and anything in between. And I contributed the chapter with a colleague of mine about digital twins in oil and gas projects and operations. But that's just one of many different types. And I think when you see all the different types of digital twins that it talks about in there, your future might be as well. So I do recommend taking a look at that if people are interested in finding out more about digital twins.
Yes, and I'm going to just admit I have not read it yet. It is a very thick book, so I I have other commitments. I'm kind of trying to finish
Okay.
up, but in any case, I do look forward to reading it, Steve. And I do thank you for coming on. We actually already have planned to get back together and do another episode. But as far as digital twins, I really appreciate it. Was a just picking your brain and talking about these, especially your experience and what you guys did, just was super interesting, and I hope the audience likes it as well. And I want to throw out to the audience too, if you have any questions for Steve, or if you want to chime in with your own experiences, I love reading the comments when you guys chime in, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, theautomationblog.com, wherever you guys want to chime in and share your thoughts, please do. And Steve, thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shawn. Always appreciate talking to you. Have a good day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank Steve for coming on the show and talking to us about digital twins, especially given his experience with that big project he just did. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, please give us a like, a sub, and a share. And when I say us, I mean me, because I'm the only one here. But please, if you do enjoy the episode, please do that. And if you're on those audio only platforms, please give us a 5-star review. This is the best way for me to keep the show going and the best way for me to find new vendors to come on the show. And with that, I just want to thank you all again for listening. If you know anybody looking for a PLC HMI or SCADA training, please mention my website, theautomationschool.com. And with that, don't forget you guys can connect directly with me. I connect with everybody who's in industrial automation. You can do so at Mr. Shawn Tierney. That's my name on LinkedIn. Of course, you can become a member and unlock the video episodes of episodes like this that are not sponsored. It's just $10 a month over at theautomationblog.com or YouTube. And that's all I have for you guys. I want to wish you good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.